Hello and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the first Living with Liver Disease session of 2023. My name is Nem Maximovich, and I'll be the host and moderator for the session. Just some housekeeping items before we get going. If you could please place yourself on mute and turn your video off for the time being so we don't have any interruptions during the talk. With today's session, we're going through our first of our 7 sessions planned for this year, Living with Liver Disease program. And we're going to start off on the topic of nutrition and liver health today. So first, I'd like to start with acknowledging that the Canadian Liver Foundation's national office is situated upon traditional territories of the Anishinaabe peoples and of the Haudenosaunee peoples covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. The Canadian Liver Foundation's Living with Liver Disease program has been around for more than 25 years, and it continues to serve as a supportive educational tool for both patients and caregivers, as well as for folks looking to learn more about liver health. This program provides an opportunity to increase community-based learning about liver disease and the importance of liver health in hopes to reduce the incidence and impact of liver disease through our 4 pillars of prevention, early diagnosis, treatment, and care without geographical barriers. Our speakers include healthcare providers, allied health professionals, subject matter experts, as well as patient advocates. Today's session will address nutrition and liver health and liver disease. We are joined by our presenter, University of Alberta professor, Dr. Diana Major, and our health promotion program coordinator and registered dietitian, Anisha Vijh. We will also have Dr. Major and complete her talk prior to moving on to a panel discussion where we will have our speakers answer several common questions that we've been asked at the Canadian Liver Foundation. Following the panel discussion, there will be an open question and answer portion. So feel free to use the chat feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen to ask your question during the presentation. And note that questions will be answered following the presentation along with the panel discussion. Today's session will be recorded and available on the Canadian Liver Foundation's resource hub, that's liver.ca/resource-hub, the Living with Liver Disease webpage, as well as the YouTube channel and Facebook page in the coming days. So quickly, for those who may not be familiar with the CLF, the CLF was established in 1969, so well over 50 years ago now, and was the first organization in the world created to help people with liver disease. The CLF is committed to promoting liver health and improving the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of liver disease through the 4 core pillars of research, education, patient support, and advocacy. At this time, I'd like to welcome our first speaker, Dr. Diana Major. Dr. Major is an associate professor in clinical nutrition at the Department of Agriculture, Food, and Nutrition Science at the University of Alberta. Research focuses on treatment strategies, including nutrition support interventions in chronic liver disease in both children and adults, as well as lifestyle modifications, patient outcomes, and evidence-based clinical diet and nutrition practices. Dr. Major, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I just need the person to stop screen sharing. Okay, great. Thank you. So it's my pleasure to be here today, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. As Nim mentioned, I'm a professor at the U of A. I'm also a clinical dietitian by training, and my area of expertise is in pediatrics and liver transplant and in end-stage liver failure. But as Nam mentioned, I also do some work in adult nutrition related to liver disease. Yep, this is what I worried about. My computer doesn't like. Sometimes it gets jammed. I'm so sorry. So some of the things I wanted to talk about while I try to sort out my computer issues, that takes care of that a little bit, is to let you know that, in 2019, Canada's Food Guide was developed to meet the health of Canadians. And there's a lot of really relevant messaging in Canada's food guide for individuals with liver disease. For example, the consumption or the emphasis on consuming plant-based proteins as being really important. And there's lots of evidence that shows not only fruits and vegetable, but plant-based proteins such as pulses, beans, and so forth have a lot of antioxidant properties that are healthy for the liver. And so the Canada's Food Guide really does have a lot of strong messaging about eating lots of green, red, and berries in terms of promoting antioxidant intake. And when you have liver disease, a focus on antioxidants is really important because it helps the liver heal. The other things that are really important to healthy nutrition, besides what you actually put on your plate, but is also things like thinking about mindful eating, because in liver disease, it's really important to maintain a healthy body weight. So in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, that's particularly important because your liver disease will get worse if you are gaining weight and into an unhealthy body weight range. The other things that are really important are when you have really serious liver disease, when you have cirrhosis, body composition matters then too, because your muscles are really important in terms of maintaining your health as well. And individuals with end-stage liver problems who are just waiting for transplant can often have reduced skeletal muscle mass. So the protein and the quality of the protein, and it comes back to that plant-based proteins and animal-based proteins of being a high-quality choices are really important to maintain your skeletal muscle health and your liver health. So you can see that Canada's Food Guide really does have a place in promoting healthy eating. And we also want to really think about the quality of the carbohydrates that you're going to eat. So carbohydrates have protein, they're not a high source of protein, but they definitely are a source of proteins in the diet, but they're also a source of carbohydrates. And it's not to say that carbohydrates aren't great for you, because they are. They're really important, again, for energy substrate, for your muscles to work. Your liver needs those, but it's the type of carbohydrate. So complex carbohydrates found in whole grains are very healthy for a person, but things such as sugary drinks or the types of sugars you might find in baked goods can have a sugar called high fructose corn syrup. They do make those baked goods taste nice and sweet, but the problem with high fructose corn syrup, it takes the machinery in your liver and it says, I want to make fat. So in particular for fatty liver disease, foods or processed foods like baked goods, sugars that are added to juices are often not the best choice for someone with liver disease, because it's telling the machinery in the liver, don't make those healthy type of fats, but make fat that can cause inflammation and oxidative damage to your liver. So keeping that in mind, the many associations, I only listed a few here, but the American Heart Association, the European Association for the Study of Liver Diseases, the North American Society of Pediatric Gastroenterology, Hepatology, and Nutrition, many of them came out with guidelines that are fairly strongly worded in the sense about limiting the amount of sugar-sweetened beverages that a person should drink. So even in kids, they say 1 or fewer 8-ounce drinks per week of juice. Juices that have added sugar, pops, should be the maximum. And for children under 2, it should be completely avoided, because again, it pre-programs the machinery in your liver to upregulate fat synthesis. And then on top of it, for small kids, they like the taste of juice, and if they get juices with extra sugars in them, they may refuse to drink other healthier beverages that contain calcium or vitamin D. So really important to be mindful about how much of sugar-sweetened beverages you're going to drink if you have liver problems. For the adult, a 4-ounce glass once a day, that's probably okay. But really trying to be mindful about the quantity. Add extra water, add ice cubes, diluted if you want to have something, and choose something that doesn't have added sugar. Add it to it. Look for the words on the food label, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the talk, that say high fructose corn syrup, because that really doesn't make your liver feel good. It upregulates fat synthesis. It makes insulin resistance worse, so that you're going to make more triglycerides and deposit more fat in your liver. Now, some other concerns in liver disease or nutrition that we should be thinking about to keep our liver healthy are micronutrients. So there's lots of emerging evidence that shows vitamin D, for example, can help be associated with improvements in fibrosis and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Moreover, we live in Canada, where the number of sunlight hours is reduced substantively in the winter months. And so even though our skin can make some vitamin D, it's generally thought the population needs a supplement in the wintertime of 1,000 to 2,000 IUs per day. And in some parts, like in Edmonton, for example, so I'm much further north than, say, Southern Ontario, the need for daily supplementation, even in the winter, it can be, in the summer, even with active sunlight exposure, vitamin D levels can still be low because we wear sunblock to protect our skins from developing skin cancer. So vitamin D is a really important nutrient. Vitamin E is also important. Luckily for us, we can find lots of vitamin E in green leafy and orange vegetables and in nuts and seeds. Vitamin E is another antioxidant that the liver likes. It helps keep inflammation down and helps keep your liver healthy. And then finally, you've probably heard lots about omega-3 fatty acids, which we'll talk a little bit more. But there is evidence, again, that omega-3 fatty acids can be really healthy. So that's the kind of fat that you find in fatty fishes, for example. And so eating fish once or twice per week, or a fatty fish source, is really important to get some sources of omega-3s. You can get some in nuts and seeds as well. And there's substantial evidence that even supplementation with omega-3 fatty acids like DHA and EPA, about 1 gram in total, like of the combined approach, has been associated with significant improvement or reductions in blood lipids and inflammation in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So I'm not going to tell everyone to rush out to the store to buy a bottle of omega-3 fatty acids, but it's certainly important to integrate different types of foods in order to get sources of these nutrients in your diet. So here on this slide is a bunch of slides that show you about vitamin D. Vitamin D is present in those fatty fishes that I've been talking about for the omega-3 benefits, but you can also find some vitamin D in vitamin D fortified beverages, such as the juices. I told you to be careful how much you drink of those, but you can also drink, there are a lot of really great vitamin D and calcium fortified plant-based beverages out there, almond milk, soy milks that are high quality protein, particularly soy. And at the same time, you can get a reasonable amount of vitamin D in your diet. There's a little bit in egg yolks, a little bit in irradiated mushrooms, and in some yogurts. Companies don't routinely supplement vitamin D in yogurts, although with the new labeling laws, they'll be labeling it more clearly by 2024, and more companies are adding vitamin D to the yogurts. Pediatric yogurts are almost always routinely fortified with vitamin D, but there are some adults. So I'm going to encourage you to also, check your food labels when you go to the grocery store, so you can buy a yogurt that has extra vitamin D in it, because it's really, really important. Breakfast cereals can have a little bit of vitamin D in them, although they're a great source of B vitamins, for example, and folate. But when you add a vitamin D fortified plant beverage or vitamin D fortified cow's milk, the combination of the two can be a really good source of vitamin D as well. So I'm going to encourage you to try to incorporate fatty fishes into your diet once or twice a week, and to look in the grocery store for your yogurts that are fortified with vitamin D, or your plant-based beverages. Egg yolks do have a little bit of vitamin D. It's not a lot. And some margarines are fortified with a tiny bit amount of vitamin D, but I'm not going to be encouraging you to eat lots of margarine to meet your vitamin D needs. The best way is a plant-based beverage that is fortified with vitamin D or a cow's milk is the best way, with a yogurt. There are some soy products out there as well that have been recently more consistently that people are also fortified with vitamin D. In the wintertime, it's a good idea to consider taking a vitamin D supplement if you have liver disease, 1,000 to 2,000 IUs per day. Even if you take it a few times per week, 3 to 7 times per week, 1,000, that can help boost your vitamin D in the winter months when our levels often fall. Because vitamin D, again, optimal vitamin D has been associated with improvements in liver health for people who have liver disease. It's not going to fix all the issues, but it can be an adjunctive or supportive therapy to help deal with all that inflammation that can occur when you have liver problems. So some of the other nutritional things that are coming up that lots of people ask about are, especially for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, are like diets that encourage intermittent fasting. So all of us fast overnight when we go to sleep, whether you sleep for 6 hours, 12 hours, or my favorite time is 7.5 hours. We're not eating during that period of time. So the premise of intermittent fasting exists for everyone. Some of the more rigorous approaches, though, of intermittent fasting is to reduce the time during the day. So some people may decide to fast between or not, they'll only eat, for example, between, say, 12 noon and 8 p.m. at night. Some people choose 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then after that they don't eat anything. And that's fine, because lots of people can go out without 12 or 14 hours without eating. The more approaches of intermittent fasting that are trying to promote weight loss become more strict about what you eat, because in intermittent fasting, lots of people, they focus on the Canada's Food Guide, the plate, but not necessarily trying to lose weight. If you're trying to use this as a strategy to lose weight, then there are a variety of approaches where some people, eat normally for 5 days, what their regular intake is, and then for 2 days, not necessarily 2 days in a row, but for 2 days out of the week, eat a really low calorie diet of 500 calories per day. And the problem with on these days that you eat really low calories, it's going to be very, very hard to meet your micronutrient needs for like vitamin D, calcium, folate, vitamin B12. It'll be very difficult to meet your micronutrient needs, and the protein you may choose to eat may not be sufficient to keep your skeletal muscle mass in a healthy equilibrium. And so there are some limitations to like this 5 to 2, like 5 days I'm going to eat healthy and 2 days I'm going to eat really, really small amounts of food. And so that's something that needs to be thought about. If you have cirrhosis, you have to be really careful with intermittent fasting. So those days when you're trying to go to 500 calories per day, if you have liver cirrhosis, you shouldn't really do that, because your liver needs those nutrients. And plus, if your liver is that sick, the liver might not produce enough sugars, because one of the roles of the liver when we sleep is to take glycogen stores, which is a form of storing of sugars and carbohydrate in the liver, and release it into the blood to keep blood sugars normal. And so when you have cirrhosis, if you don't eat very much, because your liver is not going to make that the glucose or release it really well, if you don't have enough substrate to make it, it can be a problem, and your sugars could go really low, and that could also cause health problems as well. So the bottom line is, some intermittent approaches are okay. Like if you want to eat like between 12 and 8, if you're eating a healthy diet that meets your needs, that might be fine. If you want to lose weight and you want to reduce your caloric intake to 12 to 1,500 calories per day, you'll probably lose a little bit of weight that way. And you're again going to eat within an 8 to 10 hour period and fast 12 to 14 hours. That's probably okay. But if you're starting to talk about severely reducing or reducing the amount of time that you'll eat during the day, so like going down to 4 hours, I'll only eat whatever I can eat in 4 hours, and then I don't eat the rest of the time, that's not the best approach to keeping your liver healthy, especially if you have cirrhosis of the liver. It also can be really hard to maintain long periods of time when you don't eat. And so adherence can be difficult to maintain, especially with severe caloric restriction. A lot of people then feel so hungry that afterwards they binge and eat more than they eat normally. So they overcompensate for eating. And they might, when they overcompensate for eating because they've restricted themselves so tightly, they might not choose the healthiest of foods. They might reach for, those sugar sweetened beverages or, baked goods. And so that's also not the best choice, especially for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So you may see all over the media that intermittent fasting can help, especially if you have a fatty liver. And it helps if you eat a healthy diet and you don't restrict the amount of time that you're eating beyond like a 12 to 14-hour fast overnight, because people can't maintain that for long periods of time. There for sure is some evidence in fatty liver disease that when you fast, you'll use some of your fat stores, break it up, break it down, and that'll help with the amount of fat in the liver. So there's definitely some evidence for that. There's even some evidence that it's helpful if you lose a little bit of weight. But remember, rapid weight loss isn't a good thing for your liver either, and because your muscles are going to suffer from that. They're going to, if you don't get enough food in, the muscles are going to release protein from the muscles to make sugar in the blood to keep the blood sugars normal. And so that's not good for your muscles either, or for your liver. So when you're thinking about doing this, my suggestion is you start with, no longer than a 14-hour fast overnight. And that if you focus on fruits and vegetables and high quality plant proteins and low fat cuts of meat, and some complex carbohydrates and fiber, that'll make you feel full. That'll be a little bit easier to maintain, and you probably will lose a little bit of weight if you need to. Now, there are other evidence here shows that if you combine some approaches to intermittent fasting with exercise, and we're just talking about walking, it doesn't have to be aerobic exercise. Aerobic exercise definitely may make you have improvements in reductions of your liver fat faster, but there's lots of evidence to show that walking and combined with intermittent fasting can help with reducing the amount of fat in your liver. But again, you can see in this picture that you're still going to be trying to eat healthy food choices and not eating a diet high in processed sugars. The other kind of diets that are out there are probably you've heard lots about them, the keto diets. These keto diets, a lot of people talk about them when it comes to diabetes management. They're typically lower carbohydrate containing diets, typically less than 30% of energy in the diet. If they're weight loss diets, then they become more of a high fat, higher protein diet, because then most of your calories are coming from protein and fat. Some of the diets can be as low as 5% in calories. So what does that mean? If it's like less than 5% in calories, then the kind of carbohydrates you're going to be allowed to eat on those very severely restricted keto diets are like lettuce, celery. Not even carrots are allowed on those diets because the carbohydrate is too high. Maybe a little bit of broccoli when it's 10%, and cauliflower and other peppers when it's a 10% diet. But a very water, like cucumber would be another choice on the less than 5%. What they do is when your diet's really low in carbohydrate, then your insulin levels go down, and that causes your body to mobilize fat. So to take fat from your fat stores, which is what everyone wants. You want to lose fat and not lean body mass. And then you form ketone bodies. That's where the keto comes from, the keto. The fats metabolize into these things called keto bodies. And then the advantage of having keto body buildup is that you don't feel less hungry. And so you eat less and then you lose weight. So there's definitely some evidence that show that people who go on keto diets lose weight. Their blood sugars, if they have diabetes, for example, improve quite a bit. But the more you restrict the carbohydrate in the diet, the more that you're going to be at risk for having low levels of essential vitamins and minerals. And a really important one is if you go less than 20%, potassium is a huge issue. So, you know, when you think of a heart healthy diet, you think of lots of green leafy vegetables. You think of carrots, you think of a wide variety of that colorful half of the plate. Those are full of potassium. And then, so if you cut those out of the diet because you're going really low, then you can get really low levels of potassium in your blood, and that can cause cardiac problems. So going too low on those diets without, you know, getting the advice of a medical professional is not a good idea. A mildly restrictive diet where maybe you say, okay, I'm not going to eat a lot of bread, and I'm going to drink milk, and I'm going to have that in the diet, just maybe a little bit less than before. We'll cut down your carbohydrates, and that's probably okay, so long as you eat a wide variety of fruits and vegetables. And as I said, a very low level of these cut out a lot of those fruits. So a lot of those citrus fruits, all those things that you're looking forward to in the summer, like watermelon, plums, peaches, pears, are often cut out of the diet to reduce the carbohydrate in the diet and to reduce insulin levels. So you got to be very, very careful with those type of diets. And this type of diet really isn't suitable for someone with liver cirrhosis, because if you cut those out, blood sugars can go low, and that can be dangerous for a person with liver cirrhosis. But for someone with a fatty liver with a modest restriction of carbohydrates, there is some evidence that it can help with the amount of fat in the liver. But the best evidence for this diet, when the carbohydrate calories are around 30%, is probably a person who has high blood sugars, like with diabetes. And most people with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease don't have high blood sugars. It's possible, but many people don't. So, like, what is a healthy diet pattern? Because I just mentioned two fad diets. They have their potential possibilities when done in moderation, not the extreme versions of it for your liver. What kinds of diet patterns are healthy for your liver? So the Mediterranean diet plan is really, really helpful. That's a diet that, again, similar to Canada's Food Guide Plate, it's a diet focus. It really emphasizes fruits and vegetables and whole grains and nuts and seeds, but they're a little bit more emphasis, a little bit greater on nuts and seeds, although Health Canada did try to look at that literature and improve it. The other thing that's different is, you know, you can see on the side. So extra virgin olive oil is really promoted in this diet, and that's because it's full of polyphenols. Those are antioxidants that they've been very heavily highlighted as important in the diet. You can also find these polyphenols in blueberries, walnuts, cranberries, other berries that are kind of bluish in color, spinach, and green tea. So some of this diet has been modified with recommending that people drink green tea as their beverage. But remember, green tea has caffeine in it, and caffeine is good for your, like coffee is good for your liver, but we're talking about 1 or 2 cups of coffee. So if you're going to drink green tea with this diet, it's a good idea to cut down your coffee intake, because you're going to get some caffeine in the green tea. The other thing you can see is wine in moderation. There's a lot of again, red wine specifically is high in polyphenols. But if you have cirrhosis, it's probably not a good idea to add this into your daily meal plan. That's more of a prevention type of thing. If you've got fibrosis already, although red wine is full of polyphenols and antioxidants, which could potentially be helpful, you have to weigh it in the balance that alcohol can also damage your liver. So generally speaking, not heavily focused in terms of liver health. Emphasis again on omega-3 fatty acids that I mentioned. So in this, it's recommended at least 2 times per week to have a fatty fish. That would be great for not only omega-3s, but your vitamin D intake. You can see that there's a strong emphasis and a much smaller emphasis on cheese, eggs, poultry, and meats and foods with added sugars. So the emphasis really is on the bottom half. And if you think of Canada's Food Guide plate, this is a lot what the emphasis is here as well. And then lots of plant-based proteins, beans, nuts, legumes, and seeds are really important in this approach to eating. And so this is the meal pattern that the most literature supports as being a healthier meal pattern, especially to prevent non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or if you already have a fatty liver, to prevent progression to the more serious versions. But I will also say when you're emphasizing fruits and vegetables, we all know that fresh produce has skyrocketed for the prices. Like here in Edmonton, a little bit of lettuce a little head of lettuce can cost $6 to $9 depending on where you grocery shop. So the other issue I wanted to bring up is food insecurity, because with the recent, COVID pandemic, food supply chains have been interfered with. Even with the Ukrainian war and conflicts, there's been lots of proof that food insecurity is an issue. And in Alberta, where I am, Alberta has the highest percentage of food insecurity in Canada. Food prices are really expensive here. The further north you go, the more expensive. So really, it can be very challenging to eat what I've been saying, because minimally processed food prices have increased at a greater pace than, say, McDonald's has. All foods have increased in cost, but ultra processed foods have increased at a slower rate. And the irony of that is not lost on me, and I think it's very unfortunate. So I wanted to mention a few of the things that you might want to think about when, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, the food prices are so expensive, I can't afford to eat fruits and vegetables. It's not only mindful eating, but it's mindful food shopping too. I think we all have to think about, like, trying to avoid impulse buying in the foods and trying to plan ahead with our meals that we want to eat, and then going to the grocery store and being mindful about what types of foods that we need to eat. And then, when you buy food in season, fresh produce in season, like this summer, sure, it's going to be cheaper than it would be in the wintertime. Here, it's ridiculous how expensive fresh fruits and vegetables can be. And then we can consider, frozen vegetables or canned alternatives. But we have to choose wisely when we look at those. Those are a lot cheaper, and there are some disadvantages of frozen or canned. I mean, the frozen, sometimes the taste isn't always the best. It depends on so look at the expiry date. Canned, we have to be careful about the sodium content of those, because you don't want to eat too much sodium when you have liver health. So I'm going to show you some food labels and some things to think about as well. But in general, canned vegetables and fruits are cheaper than frozen, which are cheaper than fresh. Sometimes you can look for in-store deals and try to buy in bulk if you can, and then you can freeze and store things in your own pantry. If you don't have a lot of room, you can look for some staples. Rice is just one example, whole grain rice, and maybe buy some. And I encourage you to do that, because there's a shortage in the rice crops this year. You can collect grocery discount coupons when you enter the store. I am not good at collecting them prior to going to the store, but I always try to look for those when I enter the store, so I can see where the best deals are on fresh produce, and so that I'll go there as a choice to buying food. And then some of the other things, like, I'm always on the run. I'm always in a hurry. I start work really early in the morning. So a lot of the things I do to try to eat healthy during the day, I'm in a course downtown this week, and they said, oh, there's lots of places to go buy food. But I don't want to do that because then those are going to be higher fat foods or higher sodium foods. So a lot of times I think about what did I eat last night, and I'll pack some leftovers from the previous nights. Or sometimes we freeze from 2 days ago, and I'll put it in small containers or Ziploc bags, and then it'll keep cold in my sandwich bag for the few hours between the time I start my course and my lunch break. So for kids, that's really a great idea, because if they love a particular food, you can get them to eat it again later in the week, and it's frozen. By the time they go for their lunch break at school, they can eat it. Sometimes just even doing things like wraps. My children love chili, but they like it better with the wrap than they like it without the wrap. So sometimes we may take the leftover chili and put it in a wrap, either a pita bread, add a little bit of salsa or whatever to it in a little container, and they can add it at lunchtime, and that can also be a tasty, healthy lunch. And it can also save you a lot of money too from eating out, and helps you think of ways to use leftover veggies. So you could take your leftover carrots from last night and add it to your chili, freeze it, and then make it into a wrap, a couple of days later when you decide to thaw it out. Here, like as I mentioned, you have to be careful about the nutrient values of them. So the biggest issue is the sodium content, or the potential for extra sugars. That added sugar, high fructose corn syrup in canned fruits. It's very important to look at what the item is packed in. Is it packed in water? Like for tuna or salmon, is it packed in oil, or is it packed in water? Are the peas, the canned peas, what's the salt content like those? And I'm going to show you some food labels of where you can maybe choose a canned version, if it's on sale, that with a lower amount of sodium versus the other. So it's really important. So when you go to the grocery store, having a grocery list, thinking about the coupons that you can buy some food items in bulk this week and store them, and consider frozen versions of the vegetables over fresh if the fresh is really expensive. So in food labels, what you want to look at is something called the percent of the daily value, and something that's over 10% means that's a really good source of a nutrient, and if it's over 15%, it's an excellent source. So sometimes that's a good thing. Like if, for example, this one here, this food label says it's 10%, that means it's a good source of vitamin D. It's not an excellent source, but it's a good source. Look at the iron, it's 45%. That's an excellent source, whatever this food item is, of iron, and that's a great thing. But when you come to sodium, you want it to be less than 5% if it's possible. So when you look at the sodium content here, it's kind of like 7%. So it's not high, but it's not really in that low amount either, because for sodium you wanted to say it's a poor source. So having a percent DV less than 5% would be a better choice. Same thing with this one, is pretty good for saturated fat though. Look at that, it's 5% for saturated fat, which means this is a low source of saturated fat. So this particular food item has some benefits to it from a micronutrient point of view and from a fat point of view. So when you're choosing that canned vegetable, then you want to choose something with a DV of sodium, if you can, of 5% or less. You can also take that canned vegetable, the canned peas, take it out of the liquid and rinse it off before you actually cook it too. That'll get rid of some excess sodium sticking to it as well. And that's something to think about as well. When you're looking at food labels, you again want to be super careful about, is there any extra sugars? This particular one, it's a little bit hard to see, but it talks about cane sugar. So the use of cane sugar. Sugar is sugar. So cane sugar sounds lovely, Caribbean, and in the fields, it sounds lovely to, I know my spouse. My spouse firmly believes that sea salt isn't real salt. It's by the sea and it's healthier for you. And sea salt is sea salt, right? So I keep encouraging him not to choose food items with higher amounts of sodium in it. So it's important to like look at those food labels and think about if you can find one with a lower percent DV, and then look for words. This one helps. It says no sugar added, but remember the actual peach itself has carbohydrate to it. So carbohydrate's not your enemy, but things like high fructose corn syrup aren't the ones that you want to choose. I don't want to say it's your enemy, but it's not the best choice. Things with sea salt, or any words of sodium more than 5% in that particular item isn't the best choice. Look for something that's lower than that if you can find it. And then like when you look at all this food label, you're saying to yourself, well, oh, is there any fructose in it or high fructose corn syrup? Here it actually says glucose, fructose, there's sugar, added sugar to this food item. So this is a food item that definitely does have some extra added sugar, and you have to ask yourself, do you really need that sugar? Wouldn't it be better to eat the complex carbohydrates, or frankly, have something really yummy like a fruit, your favorite fruit, and chop it up and eat it as you know, a side dish to add to things rather than this processed option. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that when you go to the grocery store, try to buy in season. Buying fresh produce is a really good idea, but I know it's challenging. That's when you want to get those coupons, because you can buy, sometimes they might have bananas on sale. You know, you can buy 2 bunches of bananas for a really low price, 2 bags of mandarin oranges, whatever it is. The main grocery store chains usually have deals where they've bought bulk purchases and they want to offload them before they go bad. And so they may offer a particular fruit or vegetable with a reduced price. And so I encourage you to look at those coupons as you walk into the store so that you can have the opportunity to buy more fresh produce over the frozen or canned. But frozen has lots of really good opportunities, especially in the winter when you can buy mixed berries and mixed fruits, which would otherwise, even if you could pay the higher price, they actually taste better than the ones on the counter because they're older, the shipment takes longer, they're not fresh, and so forth. So these are things that you can think about, and then that'll help you to save money because things are definitely much more expensive. And then including your family. I know you probably heard this lots of time, but family involvement in lifestyle change is really, really important, including your family members in the grocery list preparation. For that, including them in meal preparation is a great idea too, because it really does promote the whole family wanting to make lifestyle change. And that includes physical activity. And physical activity can mean a lot of things, from walking more, walking around the block, going outside now that it's like in Edmonton, the sunlight hours are really extending now, and everybody's out in the evening, and the sun doesn't set till about 8:30-ish now. And so lots of people are going outside and walking and doing more things. And so that's an important thing to think about doing as well, because that's healthy for your liver, healthy for your muscles. And I always say healthy muscles make a healthy liver. They're very tightly coordinated together. So thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Dr. Major. Wonderful, wonderful talk to kind of highlight some of the key aspects of dietary fads that we definitely get quite a bit of questions on in terms of what's considered healthy and what's not considered healthy. So what I'll do, we'll pop the screen back up here for everyone. So we'll go through a few panel discussions, questions that we're going to have our speakers, both Dr. Major and Anisha, who will be joining us on camera shortly. And some of these questions are questions that we've received over the last several months, but also questions that we consider pretty common at the foundation. So what we're going to do, we're going to kind of open to both of our speakers, but I'll go through the main question here on the screen. Pretty kind of common out, but it's one of the questions that comes to practical eating, and it's how can I eat well for my liver when eating out or ordering in? So I'll get Anisha perhaps start on this question to provide us some kind of tips or points, and then Diana, you can definitely jump in on this question. So I'll hand it over to you, Anisha, for this one.
Thank you so much, Nem. I know that eating out is definitely something that a lot of people, including myself, really love to do, especially as a treat. Summer's coming up, it's patio season, but it can be really tricky trying to make sure that you're still eating well for your liver, especially when you're dealing with liver conditions or liver diseases. So some really great kind of easy swaps that we can do are really trying to focus on dishes with lean proteins or plant proteins. So focusing on chicken, fish, beans, tofu, even some pork products like pork tenderloin or beef tenderloin that are a little bit more lean and aren't going to add too much added fat. Focusing more on vegetables, choosing a side salad instead of fries more often, looking at maybe keeping your sauces or dressings on the side, basically as a way to control how much of that you're consuming, because those can also often have a lot of added sugars or added saturated fats to make things taste good, as well as added salt. If you are more inclined to maybe want to treat yourself and have that fried chicken sandwich or, you know, a burger, maybe eating out less often is a good option as well. Not only is it good for your health, it's also good for your wallet, saves you some money. But saving going out for special occasions can mean that you're, you know, having less of those foods overall, but it does give you more flexibility in your diet to be able to have those foods when you're really craving them and make them a bit more of a special treat rather than an everyday occurrence. And not have to worry as much about how it will fit into your diet if you're only having it on more rare occasions. The other thing, especially common for a lot of people, is being mindful if you are consuming alcoholic drinks or soft drinks with your meals out, how much of those you are consuming. Obviously, alcohol is not something that you should be consuming if you have liver disease if possible, but obviously that's not realistic for every individual, and I can completely respect that. But if you are consuming alcohol or sugar sweetened beverages, as Diana mentioned, they can do some harm to your liver. So trying to be mindful of if you are going to consume those beverages, just making sure that you're consuming them in moderation. To not add too many extra added sugars or added hidden calories to your diet if you're going to be eating out and potentially having a higher calorie meal than you might otherwise have to begin with. Dr. Major, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, like I love eating out, and especially like barbecue, like I love barbecue. And so I guess the only thing I'm going to suggest is that the cooking method, you could ask like how they're preparing and avoiding breaded meats, for example, but barbecue can be really good. And you can add a little bit of sauces to moisten it up, and then ask them to fill up your plate, as you mentioned, with fruits and vegetables. Or like if you go to, you know, have a sandwich made, for example, loading it up on lots of lettuce, tomatoes, and if you like pickles, for example, it can give you a little bit of a different zest and flavor to things, and you can still eat out and enjoy it. Shredded lettuce can be added to like burgers, for example, and really give them onions if you like onions, and really trying to ask the people where you're buying it if they can really go heavy on the vegetables in that sandwich. You'll feel more full, and you won't have all of those extra condiments that might, you know, increase the fat content of that, and you can still enjoy it. So I guess that's wraps are a favorite in Edmonton, for example, for a lot of people eating out. And so encouraging people to do that will be a great choice as well.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Very insightful, very practical for sure. Go on the next question here for the panels. So it's also a common one that we get as well. So it's some topics that kind of Diana was mentioning earlier, and Anisha, if you have anything to add to this one further, or Dan as well. So it is hard that we can indulge, it's hard to find certain foods in stores, especially in the winter. So perhaps some quick substitutes or alternatives for some of the common ingredients. So if somebody's looking for a specific type of food, but they aren't able to find it in the store, what will be an alternative? So whether it's a protein source or a carb source or a fat source, anything that you guys can kind of shed some light on terms of substitutes. Diane, I'll go to you first, and I'll ask Anisha that.
Okay, sure. I mean, I did mention some of the ideas. The frozen versions are cheaper, right? And so when I can't find blueberries or strawberries, fresh ones in the wintertime, I'll go to frozen sources for that. If I'm looking for like beans, like maybe I want to make chili, but my favorite kidney bean's not available, I start to think about black beans, other lentils. Can I adjust my recipe a little bit to go, heavier on those type of beans in the preparation? Maybe I might substitute by putting some extra green onions, because green onions are probably more freely available in that, to give it some green, that sort of thing.
Anisha, anything to add on your end?
Yeah, as Dr. Major mentioned earlier, there's definitely lots of ways. I would also encourage the use of canned, trying to go for no salt added and packed in water where possible, or even dried options. I know for a lot of vegetables, if they're available in your area, getting dried onions or carrots, beans, or different vegetables like that, or even fruits, can be a great way to get that nutrition in and get the ingredients you want that are a little bit more shelf stable. Or even try to swap out similar ingredients. So if you don't have an onion, maybe you have a leek. If you don't have broccoli, maybe you could try a cabbage. There's different ways that you can kind of mix and match and try and use what you have available and swap out different ingredients and recipes that you know you love, and maybe find even a better or new combination. Adding extra herbs and spices to your dishes if you don't maybe have all the ingredients you want, to try and still make it flavorful. And really just trying to see what you have available and making that work for the recipes that you are trying to create, and just kind of getting creative. Swap your proteins, maybe try a plant-based protein or a different type of lean meat. There's lots of different ways to try and get creative in the kitchen, especially when things are a little bit more scarce.
We'll go to the next question here on the screen. So it is something that we were kind of mentioning briefly, and perhaps both of you can comment on this one. Understanding that it is a busy schedule, and folks seem to be in a rush for most of their day, and wondering why or what the actual importance of having kind of family eating patterns together, or even having support for family members, why that actually is important, and is it something that can actually contribute to building some of these habits, or building perhaps some type of new behavior change? So Diane, I'll go to you first, and
Sure.
Michelle.
So from a practical point of view, like I love it when my husband gets involved in the cooking process for two reasons. One is because I can give him some education about, like, for example, the sea salt issue, but also it makes the cooking process go by faster, right? So we often, my daughter and I and my husband will often chop up the different vegetables. One person will be in charge of chopping, one person will be in charge of cooking, like on the stove, like stir fry or whatever. And it just makes the actual cooking process go so much faster. So given that I often come home late, for me, this is way better, because then my daughter can chop before, and I can do the actual cooking itself. So for me, that's one of the major reasons why I love it. It's faster, and then you can all collaborate together if you want to modify things and give different ideas and get it on the table quickly.
Or Anisha, anything to add on your end?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really important habit to build with your children, especially because it can also really help with bonding, like family bonding. It gives you a time during the day to really sit down as a family, and that can really help both, emotional and mental health, as well as just helping them make some healthier choices. You know, as parents, I'm not a parent, but you know, my parents as well tried to make sure that, you know, as much as possible, healthy choices were presented to us. And that really helped in kind of informing my own eating habits throughout my life as well. And so being able to use those as learning opportunities and family bonding time, I think, is a fantastic opportunity. And getting your kids cooking in the kitchen is also a great way to build some skills, get them excited about what they're eating, and make meal times a little bit more enjoyable.
And they help you clean up too, because they clean up as you're like you're doing the meal prep. It's wonderful.
Yes, absolutely.
Best of both worlds, right?
Yeah.
We'll go to the second last question here. It's a relatively practical one. It has to do actually a bit more on the emotional eating side of things. So the question is, I end up eating much more than usual and often quote unquote junk food when I'm stressed. I don't feel good when I do this. And how can I make these changes? So then maybe you can kind of adjust or address this emotional eating kind of general, kind of what that means, what that means, or how it's referred to as, and what folks can do to help themselves in those situations when perhaps some of those cravings do kick in or stress eating kicks in.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, I'm sometimes an emotional eater, and I'll ask my husband to make something specific I like that he cooks, and just because I've had a bad day and I just want it, right? So it's completely understandable that when you feel upset, you want to eat something that's associated with pleasure. But if we, you know, are in a bad mood, we might eat a bit too much of it, and that's why we might not feel so good afterwards, like we might have overdone a good thing. And so a lot of times now that what I'm doing is trying to like drink some water with crushed ice to go with that item that I feel like I want to eat. So if it's pizza's my favorite food, and in fact, only homemade pizza my husband makes is my favorite food. And so I'll often drink like fluids before I actually go to eat it to sort of help me not overdo a good thing. I cut smaller pieces. And the other thing that I'll do with my favorite food, with the homemade pizza that my husband makes, I eat it on a small plate. You know, you can only put so much on a small plate. So it prevents me from, you know, having 3 pieces, you know, all at once on a large plate. I might just take one, and then I'll say to myself, I love that. I've had such a bad day. I want to rush down and get, but then I just go, I can wait a little while and see if I really want to do it. And I perfectly think it's okay to have some of your favorite foods, even if they are junk foods. Mine just happens to be a vegetarian based pizza that I love the way my husband makes it. So don't like beat yourself up if you do eat it, but try to pace yourself a little bit, like by using a smaller plate, stepping away from the location of where the food is, talking with your spouse or your child about what's going on with your day. And, you know, some water too in between will help also fill you up and distract you as well. And then you can feel good about eating it, because the amount you eat makes you feel good, but not too much.
Absolutely. Anisha, anything on that?
I couldn't agree more. I think that those are all really great tips, and I would absolutely recommend that to people that are struggling with this as well. Yeah, really trying to find out kind of what a portion that feels good to you would be, and really trying to stick to that portion so that you're not overdoing a good thing. And if you're still feeling upset, trying to find other coping mechanisms, maybe talking to a loved one, going for a walk, journaling, another activity that you like that you can maybe get your mind off of that stress, that you're not only using food as a coping mechanism, but rather eating both for pleasure and for nutrition is really important. And of course, we all have days where, you know, you really just want that chocolate bar, you really want that bowl of chips or that slice of pizza, and that's absolutely fine. But making sure that relying on food isn't your only coping mechanism for stress is really important to avoid accidentally overdoing a good thing, as Diana had mentioned.
Yeah, definitely an intriguing topic that we can address at a later time for sure. Last question here on the screen has to do with kind of changing things up or spicing up in terms of food. So it is hard to, or find it hard to stick with a liver-friendly diet. It feels bland to some degree, and it can feel boring or even look boring. How can I get better food while on this diet, or what can you do to even make this food perhaps even taste better? Diana, I'll make you go first, and then we'll finish with Anisha.
Spice it up. Like, I really do, like, have a look at your spice rack and see what's in there, and add it to it, because I think it'll spice it up, give it more flavor. Consider like being unorthodox and mixing your vegetables in a different way. Sometimes even like a shake, like, or like, I love, so sometimes just to bake some vegetables in the oven, and like kale chips. Like, we make kale chips in my house with olive oil, and we sprinkle it on there. And I have a craving for, chips, but I want to eat a liver friendly diet, right? So kale is great for you. And if you just put a little bit of olive oil on top of it, you can get that. It spices up kale, because kale can be bitter at times, depending on how old it is and how you cook it. And so I think just trying to be creative about taking your favorite vegetables and trying different things, grilling them, barbecuing them, and I think mixing them together in different ways that maybe you haven't done before, just to try to get a different feel of different taste combos. And I think that'll make it more interesting for you.
Absolutely. Anisha, final thoughts on this one?
Absolutely. I used to be a chef, so I have lots of thoughts, but I would definitely not undervalue the power of things like vinegars or citrus, or marinating your meats or your vegetables in different marinades. If you're looking for something like a creamier dressing, trying maybe an avocado-based dressing, or a Greek yogurt-based dressing that maybe is a little bit more higher protein or more healthy fats in it, rather than maybe a mayonnaise-based dressing. There are lots of ways to add tons of flavor. As Diana mentioned, grilling, especially with summer coming up, everyone loves a barbecue. Roasting vegetables is a really great way to add tons of flavor. And looking at kind of those low sodium, low sugar, low fat sauces that you can use to kind of add to different marinades or different toppings on whatever you're making are great ways to really add a lot of flavor on top of using whatever herbs and spices you happen to have in your cupboard.
Perfect. Thank you for that. We'll take a few questions. We have a few minutes left. We'll have a few questions that we're just going to throw out to both panels that came to the chat box. One here, perhaps then you can kind of address this one. It's thoughts on any of those protein drinks that are available in hospitals, or any type of already made protein drinks that you may find at the grocery store or at certain centers, in terms of just general thoughts or even suggestions in terms of how that fits in terms of a healthy diet or a healthy liver diet. Dinah, any comments on those protein drinks?
I have a family member. My elderly mother drinks protein supplements, like, for example, Boost or Ensure, because she has swallowing issues, and they can be a healthy part of a healthy diet as a supplement. They're expensive. There are other protein powders that you can do, but honestly, the easiest way to add protein to your diet is to just throw into your blender a bunch of different vegetables and yogurts, and just like throw everything together and get yourself like your own blended drink. And you can add a protein powder if you want for those, but be careful how much you add. Like a scoop of something is okay, and they can be a good source of micronutrients as well. So I think they're okay, but the commercial ones are getting very, very expensive.
Perfect, thank you. Anisha, anything to add on that kind of question with respect to the protein supplements?
Yeah, I agree. A homemade smoothie, which you can batch or even freeze into popsicles, or even ice cubes and reblend it at a later date, if that's something that you're worried about for convenience, is a great option. The prepackaged ones are very expensive, and some of them are actually quite high in sugar. So you just do want to be careful with reading the labels on some of them, especially some of the flavored ones can get a little bit high in sugar. If there's something that works for you and overall make up your balanced diet to make sure that you're getting enough protein, then great. But there are, as Diana mentioned, Dr. Major mentioned, quite a few other options to try and get more protein quite easily in your diet. So it's really a personal preference, I think, but it depends on your lifestyle and really what works for you.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Just one last question here that came in chat. It's essentially some of the Mediterranean diets that Diana was mentioning earlier. If somebody wants to follow that pattern, but is not a big fan of fish or chicken, would they be able to replace that with any beef or any kind of red meats in terms of the main protein source or a fatty source if somebody's not willing to or doesn't feel like they enjoy the fatty fish? So just a question on whether they can substitute the fish for beef with the Mediterranean diet pattern.
So I vote yes. I live right now in a beef province, right? We're a major producer of beef, lean cuts of beef. I say yes. Turkey's a really good choice too. Sure. I mean, because the premise, although the premise is, fatty fish as a main meat source, it only said it's 2 times per week. And then on other days of the week, you're going to eat these other kind of meats up if you like to eat animal-based proteins. So why not choose something that you like, but choose lean cuts of it, right? So they are more expensive. Beef can be pretty expensive, but turkey's a good choice, and turkey isn't as expensive. But I vote yes, because I think the idea is you want to eat lots of fruits and vegetables. This is what this is promoting. And then if you're going to stick to that dietary pattern, you want to shift a little bit the type of animal-based protein, go right ahead and do it, because you need to eat for joy too, and for taste, and for ethnic cuisine. Like you really want to be able to be happy. And so my vote is, if you want to eat beef, eat it.
Anisha, final thoughts on that final question?
Absolutely agree. I think that, you have to really tailor it to what works for you and your lifestyle. I think if you're going to eat more beef or more pork, then that's absolutely fine. If you're trying to get in lots of fruits and veggies with that, I think then that's, overall a very healthy diet. And as Diana said, you really just have to make sure that you're both eating for nutrition and for joy, because that is kind of the whole point of life for a lot of people, is being able to eat for pleasure. If you're looking for other meat sources as well, you could try different types of seafood, or you could try a plant-based protein, but that also depends on your budget, your culinary skills, your interest in those things. So I think if beef and maybe pork are things that you're wanting to focus more on, and you're still trying to follow other aspects of the Mediterranean diet, like getting healthy fats from other sources, getting lots of fruits and vegetables and whole grains, and I think that would be perfectly reasonable.
Perfect. Thank you for that. All right. Well, that was the last question, and we had a few questions pop up in the chat, but we'll try to answer those questions once we wrap up this webinar for the sake of time. But I do want to thank both our speakers, both Other Major and Anisha too, for helping us with this webinar tonight, and of course providing their great insights and skill sets and experiences on this subject. As of course, everyone can tell, we can go on for a very long time on this topic, and we're going to try to address this topic throughout the year in different ways, addressing some of the behavioral aspects of it, some of the modifications that come with it, and some of the other questions that folks have had through our helpline. So as mentioned, this session will be available on our CLF Living with Liver Disease webpage. That's the link highlighted in yellow. That's going to be on our Facebook page and the YouTube channel over the next few days as well. Keep an eye out for our next session, which will be sometime in May, mid-May, end of May, where we're going to focus on liver health and caregiving, specifically for some of the caregivers out there and with respect to chronic liver disease. And if you don't see any information on our livingwithliver.ca or liver.ca page, that's livingwithliver.ca-LWLD, most of our session information will be available there. And if you don't see, just give it a few weeks. We're probably finalizing speakers at the time, but all the information will be available there for upcoming sessions as well. Before we conclude, we do want to mention that there will be a post-session survey and a quick evaluation at the end of the session. It will be sent to you pretty quickly afterwards, I believe within 24 hours of this webinar. So it'd be great if we can get some feedback on how well we did with this session, and it helps us with our programming throughout the year. And of course, we value all the feedback. So again, we want to thank you all for attending today's session on liver health and nutrition. Should you have any additional questions for us, that includes our speakers today, please feel free to email us below. That is clf@liver.ca. Those are the questions that come directly to our department and are answered by myself or Anisha, and we'll be more than happy to answer additional questions that we may have skipped here. And Dr. Diana Major is, I'm sure, more than happy to provide her comments and insights as well. So thank you all for attending today's session, and should you have any other comments or insights, feel free to visit us on our liver.ca page. And of course, anything liver health related, please do follow us on our social media channels highlighted on the screen. So thank you all once again, and enjoy.